All right, you guys, for today's video, I'm gonna be showing you guys how to do a blonde refresh without overlapping everything and compromising the hair, but also overlapping if needed. For example, on her hair, she's got her natural regrowth. We've got a good 2 inches coming in. You can see right here, she's got a little bit of gold banding, and then her ends are pretty light. So I obviously want to brighten all of this up. I definitely want to knock through a little bit of this, and then this is good. We just need to refresh and tone. I know everyone gets scared of overlapping. I want to talk about when it's okay, why it's okay, and how to do it safely. So if you're interested in watching this, stay tuned. First tip when you're doing something like this is having a clean parting, especially when it comes to overlapping and keeping the safety of the hair in mind. You want to make sure that all your sections and partings are really clean so that you can work precisely and efficiently and you're not pulling hair from other sections. It's just going to be a lot easier to keep everything in the right place and avoid overlapping if you do it this way. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work up this side of her head, then I'm gonna do the other side, then I'm gonna do the middle mohawk section, and I'm gonna show you how I do this to utilize brightness without overlapping, and when I do overlap, I will show you why. First things first, we mixed up Schwarzkopf Blonde Me. You guys know I've loved this lightener for years. I will say the only downside and the reason that people try to avoid it sometimes is the swelling. I've had this mixed up like 10 minutes and you can see that it is getting kind of puffy. That is a downside, but I love the lifting power it has and I feel like it works so well. And the built-in bond enhancement is a game changer. Obviously Olaplex is my #1. I add Olaplex to everything, but Schwarzkopf has that bond enhancement built in. Typically I actually just mix Olaplex in with it just for like extra safety on blondes, but if you're out of Olaplex and you're in a pickle, this has it built in so you're not screwed if you don't have Olaplex. That lightener was 20 volume. And then in this bowl, I have Schwarzkopf Blonde Me mixed up with 7 volume, and this is what we're gonna use if we overlap at all, because obviously we're not gonna overlap with anything that's too high of a developer. We're using the higher volume on her root to get that lift, and then when we overlap, we're gonna use 7 so it's a little more safe. This also has Olaplex in it as well. First things first, she told me she wants to be super bright blonde, super white. The goal with her is always as solid white as we can get without it being silver. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you guys what I do in her hairline. When you're wanting it so solid, your natural response is to be like, okay, I'm gonna go in and do some slices around the hairline. I do that sometimes, but I've found through trial and error that yes, it gets it very solid, but then the grow out is so harsh that it looks like a solid line. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a very tiny, tiny section that I could slice, and I'm gonna baby light it, because doing that is gonna keep that appearance of it being really solid, but it is gonna be a softer grow out so she doesn't feel like she's brunette when it starts coming in a couple weeks. And you can see it's very minimal dropout, but even having that is gonna ensure that this looks really natural when it grows in, but also still really bright. And when you're doing the hairline, tension is key. Okay, another tip for doing a blonde refresh without overlapping is using a smaller brush. As you guys can see, this is a smaller brush I'm using, and I am just focusing that in the root area. And the smaller brush is going to ensure that I'm not dragging any product down to the ends. I'm just focusing on the regrowth area. Sometimes I go side to side like this to get really good saturation. And I try to go pretty close to the root, but I never extend past the foil line. And since Blonde Me does swell a little bit, it will travel up, so keep that in mind. And then I'm gonna take that 7 volume and I'm just gently feathering that where it's gold at the ends. And I feel like around the hairline, that first foil is always the hardest because you don't really have a sturdy base to work under. And then as soon as you get that first one in, it starts getting a lot easier. Next, I'm gonna do the same thing right here. And I'm doing really fine baby lights, a small stitch around the hairline. And then when I get into the interior, I'm gonna do something a little different that I'll show you guys. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure that all the product is cleaned off of your brush and it's I mean, obviously there's still product on there, but you're kind of like rubbing it along the side of the bowl so that it's not like dripping over, so that you can have a clean application. And with this lightener, you can see I'm just kind of mixing it in, feathering it in with that higher volume, and then just focusing it where it's gold. I'm not taking it down to the ends. It's just that banding that I want to kick through. And I am going on an angle so that I can follow her hairline. And something I find helpful, you can kind of see that her hair naturally grows backwards like this. If I were just to follow this pattern, I'm gonna miss this. So what I like to do is kind of over direct this way so that I can make sure that I have really good tension and I'm getting everything I need to within that section. And then I kind of do the same thing when I place my foil. I make sure that I'm pulling in all directions. And then when I apply the lightener, it's the same thing. I'm making sure I kind of go this way and that way to get everything in that area. I've done the hairline up to this point. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take one straight above the ear, and it's a small section. And I actually like to use a board when it comes to this. And you can honestly use this board too around the hairline if you feel like you need a sturdier base to work on. And the board's actually gonna help you pull tension and stay in that same area of the regrowth without going down too far as well. I'm gonna do another one straight up right here. Kind of start building this area out. This also helps you not get too close to the top of that foil line as well. And then on this one, I actually don't have a ton of banding, so I'm good just to do the one lightener and not do the banding. I really only need to use that other lightener when I see the banding. It's not on every piece. And when I do that second lightener for the banding, you can see that I'm using a brush that I like to use for teasy lights because I'm just kind of feathering it in. Okay, now I'm kind of up to this point where the two foils meet, the angled and the straight. So now what I'm gonna do is follow that same pattern, do another angle, a few more to kind of fill in that area, then I'll continue back up the center. All right guys, so we now have her rinsed out. You can see she lifted really well. The good thing about her hair is she's like a natural level 7, maybe a little bit of a 6 in some areas. It's gotten a little darker as she's gotten older, but for the most part, she lifts so well. And she actually really likes to be a bright blonde with no ash. We obviously need to add some ash in there to counteract warm when lifting, but we don't want it to go too ashy. So I'm gonna show you guys how I do this for bright blondes where it doesn't go super silver, but it counteracts the yellow. And we just keep it a bright platinum blonde. Also, I wanted to show you how it looks when it's lifted. You can see that where we did those smaller highlights that are closer together, you can tell that the pattern is a little more like fine. And then back here, you can see that the stitches of the highlights were a little bit bigger, and you can see the variation in that, but that's actually gonna give us a lot of coverage and it's gonna make her look a little more solid because of that contrast. So I'm gonna show you guys how I tone right here. So with her, I don't like to do a root shadow or smudge because she wants to be just like solid bright. And I will tell you guys all the time in my videos that I always smudge and tap and shadow every client. And sometimes I do for her, but sometimes I don't. It also depends on how often your client wants to come in. And since this is my sister, I get to do her a little more often, so we don't really have to worry a whole ton about her going like 4 to 6 months and needing that longevity. So if you have a client that comes in pretty often, I'm gonna show you guys what we're doing. So I have Goldwell Colorants mixed up. Just kidding. I have Shades EQ mixed up, Redken, and I have mixed up 10VV 10P, and I have it mixed halfway with the clear. And this is going to dilute it a little bit so it stays bright, because 10P and 10V are obviously ashier tones, but that clear dilutes it enough so it's going to do its job without going too ashy. So I just put that in the part right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my way down that section, doing that same thing along the part, and I'm doing this first, and then I'll do the mids to ends after. And then sometimes I'll even take a brush, oh, sorry, and I'll just kind of like reinforce that in there. And when I'm doing this, I actually have conditioner sitting on her mids to ends so that it's not dripping down, because if I did this all at once with the same toner everywhere, a lot of times it takes the root a little bit longer to lift. It takes the root a little bit longer to take that toner because it lifts a little warmer, and sometimes you just need it to sit on a little bit. But those ends are so porous, especially since they're so blonde. So if I let that drip down to the ends right now and just did it all over, my ends would be silver and my roots would still be warm. So I'm doing this almost like this is the shadow, even though it's the same formula. And then I'll do the ends very last. Okay, so I have her leaned back. It's just in this section because I'm going to work section by section. I recommend doing this because it does go pretty fast. So now I'm going to do those money pieces just because those will go quicker too. And I want to watch them closely. I have not done the ends yet. I've just done the root area and these money pieces, and then I'm going to do all the ends together once everything else is done. But since these highlights were a little closer together in the front and more of a baby light, I don't necessarily need to like worry about going through on the root, and it's such a small section anyway. So I'm just kind of rubbing it all together. And then I rinse those pretty quick so they don't go too ashy. Okay, and then I'm gonna rinse the rest of this section in the root area just so that it doesn't go too silver, and then we're gonna move on to the next section, and I'll show you guys like the difference between what's been toned and what hasn't yet. Okay guys, it's kind of hard to tell on camera, but you can see that just root toning right here has just softened that a little bit, as comparison to this where it's still just like that raw lift. So I did the root and the money piece in this area. Ends are still out. I'm gonna do the same thing on this side in the back, and then we'll do all the ends together. Okay, so now I've done that same thing to the roots everywhere. I am just taking that same toner, and now we're gonna be working it through the mids to ends. It's all rinsed out of the root area, so I can work it into the root if there's areas that still need it a little bit, but overall the roots are done, so I just have to focus it mids to ends. So I am doing that all over now, and now it's easier because I can lean her back and get everything efficiently, whereas if you do this and try to get the roots too, it's just there's gonna be spots that are missed and it's a lot harder. So we're just working this through. And then we're just gonna play it by ear. When you do shades, I typically say you just eyeball it, and whenever you think it's done, it is. But with the clear on, sometimes it does take a little bit longer. So just make sure you're eyeballing it, keeping it on long enough where it's not too yellow, but also rinsing it off before it gets purple. All right, you guys, this is our finished result. As you can see, it's just a bright blonde. She looks a lot more even than she did before. And like I said, she just likes it to be bright platinum and not too yellow, not too ashy, not too silver. And you can see the blend of the highlights looks really good. We've got a really good hairline going on, and she is back, baby. So we're gonna add in a few extensions, and then I'll show you guys the finished result with those in. All right, you guys, this is the after of Kira's hair. As you can see, she's a bright white goddess, not too ashy, not too yellow. It's perfect, just like the bright platinum she loves. And you can see that her hair is still really healthy. Obviously, we added extensions in, but you guys also saw it before that. We also gave her a nice little health trim to keep her hair looking nice and healthy. That's what I always recommend for my blondes who go lighter or just use bleach at all. And we added in the Alexa extensions. We did the J-Tide wefts and the unseen tape-ins, and she's looking great. So I just wanted to show you guys the final result. Hopefully you guys learned something about overlapping from this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment below or DM me on Instagram. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a great day.